So Silksong is finally here and it's amazing, but I've got one simple question. Where the hell is this area and who is this guy? While the game is packed to the brim with content throughout, there are some things shown off or discovered that inevitably did not end up in the final release. One of those things is that one forbidden Hornet and Lace scene we are not allowed to talk about. I swear it is not what you think it is, but never mind that, there are a lot of areas, enemies, and other things we're discussing. While the point of this video is to document all of these things, it may become outdated, especially if some of them end up in the game with updates and potential DLCs. So just keep that in mind before you spam the comment section about how the goddamn flea spirit or whatever got added into the game. And with that, I think the best way to start off this journey is to talk about the biggest piece of cut content, the Red Coral Gorge. While the Coral Gorge did make its way into the game in some shape, that being a rework into the Sands of Karak and Blasted Steppes, the original gorge was quite literally the biggest area in size during its time, surpassing even Greymoor, as it was one of the first areas Team Cherry ever made. As seen in the reveal trailer, this area was extremely vibrant and colorful, and while not actually underwater, it featured that aesthetic. Now, a lot of this material comes from the ACMI exhibition in Australia, the development maps of the game to be specific. And while a lot of what I'm about to say is not truly confirmed to be the case, it is highly likely. There is some speculation of course, so take it all with a tiny grain of salt. You would enter the Coral Gorge through the big chasm where a Hornet falls in the beginning of the game, starting with a sub-area called the Coral Steppes. The gorge actually had 3 sub-areas. The main area with the tower, the vault nest, and the Coral Steppes. The steppes was originally where the judge enemies were placed, and it was the way up to the citadel, most likely where you fought the last judge as well. We have one screenshot of this area, and looking at its layout, it wouldn't really work as a climactic ascension to the Holy Citadel. Blasted Steppes really give off that sense of finality. The theme song for this sub-area also got reused for the Blasted Steppes. I'm sure that originally they had a different theme song, especially because such a bombastic track really does not fit the Coral Steppes. The judge enemies also kind of do not fit this area, and while there are some coralized judges in the game files, they still look a bit out of place in its color scheme. So this area and its inclusion remains quite questionable. At some point, the player would enter the main gorge area, the one we have seen back in the 2019 reveal trailer. In my last video, which you should totally check out by the way after you finish this one, I've made the mistake of saying that the Coral Ruins used to be a sub-area, but this is actually not the case, as the Coral Ruins soundtrack is literally just the in-game name for the Sands of Karak soundtrack. So much for that. The area was quite big and had the player going through these crusted and watery environments, with one big vertical room for the pin stress structure. There was also this strange yellow floor room, and if I had to take a guess, I think this room was where these enemies seen in the Coral Tower would spawn, as they create this yellow substance that looks very much like the room, so it was probably some sort of hazard. Okay, so it is me a day later, and I do not think this is true anymore, as we can see these same shaped yellow balls in another room leading to the citadel. This makes me believe it's actually some citadel structuring instead, and it's possible the Coral Gorge once in the past worked together with the citadel. Okay, this was the correction. Moving on. There are quite a few cut enemies from this area too, like the Crust Crawler, Coral Pilgrim, and of course the legendary Coral Swimmer Large. Not the most innovative names. The last stop for the player would be the Coral Tower, and it seems like the conchfly bosses were not a thing back then, as their first appearance dates back to the 2022 trailer. So we can assume that there was no boss before the tower. In the tower room itself, there's this little path heading into what looks to be an older version of Vault Nest. If you remember from the game, this room contains this strange ledge that doesn't lead anywhere. This is probably that ledge leading into the Vault Nest that used to be a whole lot bigger as well, while being contained inside of the actual in-game map rather than a special subworld. With how the Coral Tower was presented, I'm guessing entering it would put you at the ground floor, as there was no Silksong back in these old versions of the game, or at least nothing we have seen quite like it. The tower was originally going to be the end of the gorge, as in a 2019 blog post we see that scaling a Warlord's tower was a key marketing component of the game. This was indeed that Warlord Tower with the Crust King waiting at the top. This area of course ended up being cut due to the shift in design around 2021. Team Cherry wanted it to feel like the Citadel drained the life out of the Coral away, creating the blasted steppes and sands of Karak. And that is totally fine and even works better in the game world due to making a lot of sense. However, it is strange how this area was not given any dream exploration portion like Lost Verdania, and I do not know if it ever will. It is unlikely for this area to turn into DLC due to all of the assets still being in the game files. And with how tight-lipped about spoilers TC actually is, I doubt they would leave all of this just to turn it into a DLC later. Hell, I even found this specific room in the reveal trailer on the ACMI map. Wait, who the hell are these guys? These guys were the Steel Assassins, enemies that were cut from the game completely. Initially announced back in goddamn 2017 when Silksong was known as just a DLC, they featured a backer character and boss called Sharp, with his two companions that come from a distant land, meant to chase down and kill Hornet. Team Cherry described these three as a highly trained group that was going to have several encounters throughout Hornet's journey, with Sharp having a whip-like nose that could stretch quite far, implying that he may be made out of void. Two steel enemies were also shown chasing Hornet through the Coral Steppes area, with one of them being Sharp's companion. These enemies could also shoot lasers from this bizarre arrow, and from everything we have seen here, it seems like the Steel Assassins were meant to be some sort of stalker type of enemy, appearing out of nowhere when you were exploring the world and attacking you, most likely retreating upon being defeated or fended off. While Sharp has a full-size concept art and was featured prominently in the press kit throughout the years, he has been fully removed from it upon the release of the game, with the game files not having a single mention of the Steel Assassins at all. It is like this entire concept of steel enemies chasing Hornet was completely scrapped. A lot of people tend to assume that because Sharp is a backer character, Team Cherry is obligated to put him into the game, so the assassin should be DLC content, right? Well, there was also a backer village planned for Hollow Knight that ended up never being finished, and that village also did not end up in Silksong. There could be many reasons for this, but it may genuinely be possible that the backer who created that village just, you know, backed out and did not want their creation to be featured in the game. The same argument could be made for Sharp. It has been such a long time since 2017 that the backer who made the character may have just felt dissatisfaction from their creation and just told Team Cherry to not put it in the game. But of course, it is an assumption. It is just clear that the developers aren't automatically obligated to put the character in the game. However, I think it's actually very possible that Sharp and his companions do inevitably end up in future Hollow Knight content, as the mention of the City of Steel keeps us on edge. This area is described as being a separate kingdom somewhere in the Wastelands, and it is home to the elusive masters described throughout both games, who seem to have some sort of way to control the void. The Steel Soul NPCs are also tasked with observing different kingdoms for whatever reasons ordered by their masters, and it looks like they're the overarching antagonists of this franchise. I think with Sharp being hidden and removed from the press kits, this may be Team Cherry's actual plan, adding the City of Steel in a DLC or more likely another sequel. So yeah, I do personally think that Team Cherry is just waiting for the perfect opportunity to utilize Sharp and his companions to the utmost. But while that remains to be seen, there is one cut area that may be returning as a DLC according to some recent discoveries. Guess who's back to deliver another correction? We just got informed that the fiance of Sharp's backer actually said something on Reddit. It seems like the backer who created Sharp did not actually know that his character was not going to be included in the game, and that he was going to contact Team Cherry pretty soon. So this kind of proves that a DLC or a sequel with Sharp is actually really likely now. This was yet another correction, let's move on. Pharloom Bay is the barnacle area seen twice in the first trailer of the game. First inside of what seemed to be a town with an NPC, and second in a tool showcase where we can see these baby Kraggler enemies. While the Kraggler enemies were repurposed for that one Kraggler room, the area did not share the same fate. Originally, the Pharloom Bay was going to be placed to the east of Greymoor, where Verdania is today. According to the data mines though, there is an unused map variant showing the area next to Bilgewater. This is because the area was moved sometime during 2021, when out of nowhere it was cut. From what we know, the area was going to be quite small initially, only consisting of a few rooms and the town spoken about. But we we don't actually know if this was going to be a town in the first place, as we've never seen the wish board it holds. The place contained this strange water snail-like NPC whose internal name seemed to be Hermit Crab, with just one shell house in the background. The ACMI map, however, shows us 3 of these structures, so I really do not know where the wish board could be. Maybe this was the backer town that was supposed to be in Hollow Knight. The weird thing about this place is that in the memoriam, we can see a hang-up corpse of the Hermit Crab in a very hard to spot location, making the Pharloom Bay technically canon. Now, of course this could be a development oversight, maybe Team Cherry just forgot to remove this asset, but considering how careful they are with details and how this asset still exists in a room despite the game having quite a bit of updates at this point, I am finding this being the case far less likely. This is also supported by the fact that it was recently learned that Team Cherry seems to be editing code titled Bay, implying that this might not be the last time we see the Pharloom Bay, as DLC becomes a possibility. One last thing I want to mention is that there are still some hints of this area existing in the game, such as some spots in Bile Water having clear water, and the structure of the Pale Lake being very reminiscent of the bay. In a cut quest, Xylotl mentions how the player needs to obtain blood from mossy creatures, and in a later quest mentions mug blood in the swamp near the sea. It seems like the bay was going to be located on some sort of sea, which makes sense if we take a look at this ACMI map. This is probably one of the edges of Pharloom, and honestly I don't even want to know what is located in these waters. On the map we can also see this tall vertical tower-like asset that seems to go into the ground itself. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. The bay was honestly a really cool location, and I am disappointed it was cut. It is possible Team Cherry thought 4 towns might be too much, but I really don't think that was such a big deal. Having an ocean border of Pharloom could also have been pretty cool. This leads us into the next area, which ironically Bile Water replaced, the Gloom. But before we talk about it, there is something I have to mention. Whenever I see discussions of cut content about Silksong, about the Coral Gorge Sharpie, what the? Sharp, or even some cut tools and rooms, there are always some people who claim it with their life that it will be coming back as DLC content. And guys, I am sorry to break it to you, but that is extremely unlikely. Believe it or not, when a game is in development for such a long time, it is bound to have a lot of content the developers end up cutting because they do not fit into the vision of the product. As much as I want to see the Coral Gorge or any other area we found about so far, that is probably not going to happen, because why would Verdania get a full-size dream area while keeping the gorge in the dark? I have already said this, it is a deliberate decision. I think the reason why people tend to assume that all of this is going to be DLC is because of Hollow Knight. The reason why a lot of Hollow Knight cut content made its way into DLCs was because Team Cherry did not have enough money to initially put that content into the game. Silksong, on the other hand, was made with infinite time and money at their disposal, and they could have taken however much time they wanted developing it. All of the content cut was deliberate and will most likely never make a return for this reason, even in DLCs, where they were probably focused on adding new stuff they never even showed us before. Now, I do hope Team Cherry eventually does give us reasons as to why all this content was cut, even if a lot of it can be speculated using the material we have. So please, for your own good, stop blindly saying every piece of cut content is going to return as DLC without a single thought. You will only be set up for disappointment when the DLCs eventually do arrive. If some of them end up covering cut content too, that's great, but with the lack of evidence, that is just impossible to know and currently unlikely. What is also great is you subscribing and checking out my Patreon if you want to support these videos. Yeah, you know I had to self-plug there, moving on from this. Back in the days of pre-release Silksong, someone called the Shawarma extracted the metadata of the original trailer, giving us file names for the clips shown. One of these clips was showing an old version of the Gargan Gloom enemy shooting purple venom in an area that looks suspiciously similar to the Barnacle area, contained the file name Bitterbug, at least according to the people who organized these names. Funnily enough, another clip showing the second Sentinel had the name Gloom Beast. Why am I telling you this? Well, these file names are actually supposed to be reversed. Crazy information, am I right? Because the name Gargan Gloom proves that this clip was actually called Gloom Beast, while Bitterbug doesn't really make much sense. Either way, it's just a clip name. What does that have to do with anything? Well, you see non-existent viewers questioning my argument. In the recent ACMI zoom-ins, we can see a cut area called the Gloom. The reason why we know this was a cut area was due to the game files, where many assets use the name. This is one of the most unfinished cut areas in Silksong, as it only seems to contain one fully decorated room before it was axed. That room being the room shown in the 2019 reveal trailer. You can even see the Gargan Gloom Gloom here on the map. This was originally going to be a very deep, nesty type of area. I know that's not a word, but come on. With the Gloom enemies repurposed in the abyss populating it. It had a lot of these platforms filled to the brim with Gloom lanterns, which can be seen in old Ari Gibson sketches. There was also some weird door that we have no clues about, and the area was most likely going to house the Pale Lake. This entire region got replaced by bile water, with a lot of the assets being recolored and repurposed for that area. While I am not too bummed out about this area being axed, I do think it was a really cool aesthetic that fit into the world of Pharloom. Of course, it making sense within the game world was most likely why it was cut, as the bile water area has a lot of lore with its placement. It was actually going to be extremely huge in the early plans of the game, just like the next area we're going to talk about. So let me ask you a question. Do you remember that one Weaver door in the Moss Grotto from the now forgotten 2019 Silksong demo at E3? Because I do. This door was originally sitting at the far west side of the grotto, paired with a door we all knew about in the actual game. While the west door was completely removed, there still exists a weird ledge before it for some reason. This door would have originally led into the expanded Weave Nest Atla. This Weave Nest looped around the whole of Moss Grotto, leading back to the door in the final game, and even had additional mossy rooms at the bottom. Now it finally makes sense why this area has a map. It had quite a lot of cut rooms on the east side as well, which is a bit of a shame. One interesting thing about it is that the west part actually ended up leading into another massive cut area, the Aspid Cloverland. Aspid Cloverland, as I like to call it, used to be a much bigger clover area very similar to Lost Verdania, with the Aspids being the internal name used for the place. The only screenshots and footage we have of this area comes from pre-release material, such as this chase sequence with the Craggler in the original trailer, with this being one of the entrances to the Cloverland that got reworked. A screenshot from the Edge magazine shows a cut room from this region as well. There are a lot of cut enemies from the Cloverland, mainly enemies that were full of acid, such as these strange bugs and even humanoid enemies. There was even a little fly thing which looks like it came straight out of bile water. Disgusting. Breaking news! I repeat, breaking news. It was discovered that an enemy shown can be enabled in the game via data manipulation. This enemy was called the Grove Pilgrim, and it would summon acid that drains your entire silk bar if you stay too close to it. This makes me believe that the muck effect originally wasn't in the game, and became a thing when the acid effect was cut, because why would there be two silk draining effects that are so similar? Anyways, that's about it. Moving on. The reason why we know that these enemies came from this region is because the Acnid enemy is called the Aspid Collector in the game files, and this enemy is primarily located in Mossholm, very close to the Cloverland's original location, while also having this little acid sack in its ass, super reminiscent of all of these acid sacks shown on cut enemies. It is highly likely that the Acnid would have been an enemy in this area as well, before it was moved to Mossholm. Another thing that can be deduced is that the Green Mantis enemies such as the Escalian and the Verdanier, okay, you know what, that name sucks, fuck this. The children of Verdania could be seen on Ari Gibson's early sketches, with the page mentioning the Aspids, confirming that these enemies were originally meant to be located here. While this area was not cut entirely, it was mirrored and placed east of Greymoor, where its top half would be sized down over the years to create Lost Verdania. The bottom half, which remained near Moss Grotto, would eventually become the Worm Vase. And look, I know someone is going to make fun of me due to how I say the word worm, but please shut up. Obviously, it is unknown why the area got the axe, but since it happened around 2021, it was probably for the same reasons as the Coral Gorge. It just didn't make sense for the world to be so alive during the Citadel's influence. But then again, Moss Grotto is definitely more lively than every area in the game, and the Worm Vase are probably the most underdeveloped area in the game. Even the Craggler enemy talked about just looks so out of place spitting acid, while not a single other enemy actually does this. So even this argument might have flaws. Overall, I'm not too bummed out that this area was cut, but it definitely sounded cool. Also, when Atla got sized down, other Weave Nests were added to the map, so this was probably the reason why that was resized. Now, with most of this big known stuff out of the way, let's talk about smaller areas that can be seen exclusively in the ACMI maps. In the original sketched map for the game back in 2017, there were quite a couple of areas that stood out as cut content. These areas included the creepy Song Eater Inner Lair, the Lifeblood Spire, Mansion on the Moor, Viral Sanctuary, the Citadel Catacombs sub-area, and the Void Cult. The Song Eater is possibly the early name for the Bell Eater. I mean, it is the only thing that comes to mind. Mansion on the Moor was completely removed, and while the Lifeblood Spire was axed, it was placed around Pharloom Bay's location. So maybe that tower had something to do with it. I don't know. Also, I have no idea what the Spiral Sanctuary could have been. The Void Cult is interesting because its location appears to be where the Wisp Ticket is located. This could indicate two things. The cult could have transformed into the Wisp Ticket, but that is very debatable because in an early blog post we see the Wisp Ticket enemy in Greymoor. The other possibility is that this was an early idea for the Snail Shamans, but even that theory doesn't make much sense considering none of them are in Greymoor. I think it's very likely this idea just got scrapped entirely. And the city catacombs is, believe it or not, fully explainable. In the original reveal trailer, the Citadel was shown up to be extremely polished and clean, with no silk and corpses on the ground. This is why I am guessing the corpses were just thrown into the catacombs to be cremated in this room. This is further reinforced by the fact that this clip is called Catacombs Creeper Chase in the metadata. This could imply that early in development, these bugs seem to have more of a brain compared to the finished game, where they actually remembered to cremate bodies. And when Team Cherry realized they wanted a more dilapidated and abandoned citadel to show off how the haunting ravaged the land, they decided to scrap the catacombs and turn them into the Void Ward, with the corpses on the ground being used as enemies for the player. The overall location the catacombs would cover was turned into the Underworks as well. This is one piece of cut content that I am glad was cut, as the Void Ward is such a unique and interesting area, and the Underworks has some of the best environmental storytelling in the game. Another scrapped, or to be specific, reworked area was the Hunter's Nest that can be seen on the original map. While the location of this area matches Hunter's March, in the reveal trailer we see some rooms of the march that are not in the actual game, including one that seems to be near lava. A detail here we can see is that these bones were originally not covered in moss like they are in the final game. This is also the case with Carmelita's arena, where the bones were initially not mossy and actually pretty clean, which was also replaced even in the dream form of this fight. With the ACMI maps in mind, this confirms that a much bigger Hunter's March was originally planned, called Hunter's Nest, and we can even see that the cellar in the halfway home used to connect to the nest using these tiny end tunnels. There is even a little cut baby flying scar enemy. Personally, I don't know why this tunnel connection was removed from the main game, and I think it could have been really cool, but I do have an idea why the Hunter's Nest was cut. I think Team Cherry may have felt like they were just repeating what the Mantis village was and didn't want to go with it. It's just a bit of a shame that using Silksong in Carmelita's statue room leads you to just another extension of Farfields with no original structures and environments like in the March. As a side note, I also think this old Huntress room may have been located here, as we can see bones on the ground by the door and the Farfield-esque grass on the left, but that might be a stretch. Belhard is also pretty interesting, as there are these scrapped upper and lower sections of it that were much bigger than what we got in the game. We even got some footage of these sections from the now forgotten Nintendo 2019 slide reel. Seriously, I don't think anyone remembers this slide reel even happened. We can see that this area was going to be a bit more platforming focused, with these small unpolished bells and full of little rooms that definitely used to hold something. There is also this unused silver bell version of the firm enemy, and holy, this enemy would have made the quest so much better. I hate that this got the axe and not the goddamn courier quest. Honestly, I have no idea why these sections of the town were removed, but considering that originally Belhard was probably not haunted, these rooms may have been what it looked like in the past before the haunting. It reminds me a lot of the time when people thought the Marrow was actually Belhard. Good times. And now let us talk a bit about these strange anomalies on the maps. On the sides of the maps, there are these sub-rooms stored most likely to showcase stuff that doesn't fit onto the actual map and are in their own subworld. Some of these include the Coral Tower, the Border Case platforming section, and the Abyss Ascent. However, if we decide to pan the camera down to the right, we are met with this. This right here is the strangest and most bizarre area we've seen in the entire game. It fits practically nowhere. When the original ACMI maps came out, I had my eyes on this umbrella-like section that stuck out from afar, and with the zoom-ins we have now, I can see why. The area seems to be engulfed in some sort of cyan hue, with these strange bombastic plants sticking out of the ground. At the top we can see a strange structure in the shape of an apple with the same light coming out of it, and on top of that structure there are some assets that look like bubbles. The whole area is actually open, meaning that the player could supposedly walk out of it as it lacks walls. It also has an underground section that feels like a small cavern, with a light in one of these rooms. It is a very mysterious area that genuinely doesn't work anywhere in the map, but we may be able to make some sort of connection. If we take a closer look, we can see that some of the ground in this area is actually sloped, with the same coloring as the slopes in Mount Faye. Does this mean that this area has something to do with it? It's really hard to tell, as nothing, and I mean nothing in Mount Faye has this color scheme or even alludes to it. An even stranger thing is that when we pay attention to the right of this zoom in, we can see a barnacle sticking out from another room. This comes from a massive room that is shaped like a rectangle, with the middle looking like some sort of barnacle tower. There are many rooms like this one. In fact, the entire below portion of the map is covered in them, but unfortunately we lack clear zoom-ins to know what they are. Now, this is where I have to talk about something a little bit different and make a little call to action. You see, we can actually know what all of these areas are and what they represent. What we need though is clear zoom-ins of the maps at ACMI. So here we go. If you're going to ACMI anytime soon or before February of next year, please consider zooming into these bizarre anomalies, the Cloverland, Hunter's Nest, basically anything that we do not know what it represents, and taking pictures of it. In the description of this video, there's a Google Doc created by the community that explains what you should do in detail with a priority list, while also allowing you to post pictures you get in the comments. This is the recommended way to do this ACMI mission, and it would be great if any of you who are actually going to ACMI to help us out. If we do not manage to take pictures of it all before February, this stuff is gone, lost media. Just like that one old Team Cherry Mixer stream, if anyone remembers that shitty platform. Now, the question that can come up from this is that ACMI may provide this information online when the exhibit is over, but I doubt that is going to happen since this stuff is licensed, and we should not take those chances. I think it is very important to preserve this media, just like any media in general, no matter how useless it may be, since it could potentially in the future help modders recreate full-blown cut areas like the red Coral Gorge. Hell, all of the assets are in the game files and we already have a lot of zoom-ins for the area. It is definitely possible and would be the perfect way to keep the community of this game alive while waiting for DLCs from Team Cherry themselves. I also just wanna see what this stuff is. Thanks. Alright, finally, with all of this ACMI stuff out of the way, let us actually take a dive into the abyss that is the game files. Silksong has quite a bit of cut achievements and even cutscenes. The amount of achievements for the game used to be a bit larger and would consist of stuff like obtaining every single skill, ringing your first bell, and those types of things. However, there are two achievements that stick out: obtaining an ending and Strung to serve. The latter refers to a cut ending that can still be accessed through the game files, showing Hornet merging with Grandmother Silk, before the entire kingdom becomes haunted once again. It is very similar to the Weaver Queen ending, but with some notable differences in Hornet's appearance, appearing more like a fusion between the Pale King and Grandmother Silk. Originally, it was believed the way to get this ending would be to fail the Bind QuickTime event, but that's not true at all. This ending seemed to have been initiated depending on whether or not certain tuning forks were activated, highly likely to have been bell shrines throughout the kingdom according to some code. These bell shrines, as you may remember, used to have runes all over them in demos and trailers of the game, which were all removed, and the achievements seemingly make doing this very important. This makes me believe that originally, the player did not have to ring the bells to access the Citadel, as in the famed SGF 2022 Xbox Game Pass sizzle reel, goddamn what a name, we can see that the door to the Citadel did not contain those engraved bell symbols, instead just being a big ball. This probably means that the player was going to enter the Citadel by defeating the last judge, no bells needing to be activated, implying that if they were not rang, a Strung to serve ending would be the base ending of the game, aka the bad ending where Grandmother Silk merges with Hornet. This of course leads to another question entirely: what was the true ending? Surprisingly, it seems to have been Weaver Queen, as it is really the only possibility. Ringing the bell seemed to have originally weakened Grandmother Silk, allowing the player to obtain the Weaver Queen ending somehow. So does that mean that Silksong originally did not have Sister of the Void? Get your clown makeup back on, everyone! It's speculation time. As seen on the ACMI maps, we can see that during 2021 there were some massive design shifts in how the world of Pharloom was structured. They seemed to cut the Coral Gorge, the Aspids, and the Hunter's Nest almost simultaneously, with the Abyss not even being a thing back then. Next year, the Xbox trailer would inevitably release, giving us a 12-month release window. I think the reason why Silksong was delayed in the first place was because the concept of acts had just entered conversation. It all lines up. The Abyss was added sometime during 2022, and with that, major shifts had to happen in development. So I think we can assume that the initial version of this game would not have the Abyss, and the ending would have probably just been beating Grandmother Silk, that's it. Now, of course, saying that that is very bold. I do believe there was something after her, probably, but it's really all the information we have. I think it's kind of interesting to think about what the game could have been like if we got it around 2021, before all of the design shifts and cut content. Nintendo Treehouse saying the game is soon was such a lie, especially when the ACMI map showed that a lot of the rooms shown off in the reveal trailer only existed as proof of concept. Like seriously, most of them had no areas made yet. Also, there is this unused slap capture cutscene without audio. This one is just cool, I don't know why they didn't use it. Another thing the game is full of is cut wishes and some cut NPCs that we currently know of. Some of these quests were included in the reveal trailer, with a lot of them becoming future quests that were reworked. However, some like the plumbed rhino never made it into the game. Maybe it was the early version of the rhino beetle. There are also a lot of unused quest items such as these coral props or some axe bellheart wishes. There was even a cogwork one. Hello, I am back. We got some new information about some NPCs I want to put in. There are these weird guys who seem to be playing instruments. They do not exist in anything but this sprite sheet. Recently, however, we have gotten some sketches about them, and it was revealed that they were called bug pipers. People who took notice of this managed to quickly find a trigger for these guys in the game, giving us footage of what they would do. On the footage, we can see that it seems like Pablo is covering his ears as the loud noise from the bug pipers is killing him. And yeah, I can relate to that. The NPCs unfortunately have no SFX and all of their dialogue has been erased, but we do know their internal names: Tall, Short, and Leader. Can't believe they cut the penguins of Madagascar. We also know that they used to have some sort of quest. I'm guessing this quest would have revolved around you making them leave, and it was, in my opinion, why it was cut. I think it doesn't really make any sense why Hornet couldn't threaten these guys to leave or something. Either way, this whole thing feels like a fever dream. Like, these three are just too goofy for the game in the first place. I can't believe Team Cherry cut the best NPCs like this without warning. God damn it, man. Anyways, back to my inferior past self. One of the actual cut NPCs we have information about was the Learned Pilgrim, located in the Marrow, that will give you a quest to collect pilgrim organs for his research on the haunting. I have no idea what the implication of this quest were, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad it was cut, since it doesn't make much sense. The quest was most likely axed because pilgrims aren't meant to question their pilgrimage. Instead, just keep going to the Citadel to reach Ascension. Also, it is highly likely that you would need the weird-ass bound organ for this quest, and I am not touching that. Another NPC was the Pin Pilgrim, who used to sit by Pinley's bell home. This character was seen back in the Edge magazine, and while we know nothing of their actual significance, the reason for why they were cut is most likely because pilgrims were not allowed to carry pins with them. To be honest, I have no idea if this is actually the reason, because one of the pilgrims in Blast's Steps actually uses a pin against you like he's Yoda from Star Wars and spams that he will climb forever for some reason, which is kind of a plot hole within the game itself, I think, but it's really all we have. The last NPC we know of is the bizarre Caravantula, who is going to be some sort of shopkeeper, and it is unknown if they were related to the Fleet Caravan. The NPC seems to have been trapped before Hornet could free it, revealing that they're an arachnid, but not a weaver. According to their dialogue, it seems like they would be some sort of fast travel system throughout Pharloom, similar to the Bell Beast. And I'm guessing this was exactly why the NPC was cut, as the Bell Beast was more than enough to cover it all, but having more options may have been nice. Okay, it is the return of my future self once again. Recently, we have discovered what looks to be a sign for this NPC, labeled Bone Spider Travel. It seems to have 8 legs. Honestly, it's making me believe that it may have been the earliest version of the Bell Beast, but I don't know, I'm tired, man. Now, for some funny unused dialogue and text throughout the game. It seems that Hornet would have spoke to the Weavers before absorbing their abilities. There is this weird-ass gym dialogue probably, unused old dialogue for the Mount Fay Peak tuning fork, which probably did not require the needling to be played, and a shop prompt for the memento shell. Yeah, you would actually have to buy a shell for fucking mementos. This economy sucks. Anyways, I lied to you. The actual last NPC was the Flea Spirit. We do not talk about the Flea Spirit. We also have some cut items and enemies to talk about that do not really belong in any category. First of all, it seems like Queen Vespa was going to be a boss, as she has a full sprite sheet with animations and different attacks. If I had to guess, this boss boss was most likely going to appear in the red memory, but they cut it for technical reasons. There are many questions that will have to be answered in this fight. Like, what would happen if the player died? Would they be transported outside of the memory, causing a sequence break? What if a bench was placed before Vespa? Wouldn't that lock the player inside of the red memory until they win the fight? This is why I think the fight was cut, and as much as I wanted to see it, it probably never could have worked out very well. But remember, there's always DLC. As for items, there originally used to be silk reserves. I'm guessing you could consume these to restore silk. The reason why they're removed is kind of obvious, it just feels useless and would most likely stop the tension in fights. Other items included stuff like the rusted cage key, which was obviously going to be the item needed to free the Green Prince, and there was even a key of the first sin, before they decided to keep the key of the apostate. There even exists an old blurry slab key, and there is this strange musical instrument referred to as a seal that makes no sense, and of course, a paintbrush set. Funnily enough, it seems that there were also originally going to be bell station tokens you would have to insert to open up a station instead of rosaries. These would have most likely required you to purchase them from the shopkeepers, as there are multiple sprites of them together. I think this was a really good thing to cut. Unlocking bell stations with a limited resource was definitely taking it too far. Some small interesting stuff is that the Void used to be a Materium item. There were also early designs for the Hunter and Wanderer crests, this weird hut crest that we know nothing about, and the Weaver crest. Lastly, there are some interesting cut tools, such as these two only seen in the reveal trailer. If I had to guess, these were the early versions of the Boomerang and the Weave Light, but that may be a shot in the dark. There is also the old version of the Long Needle tool. This one looks cool. The Dust Pillow is the interesting one, as it was the latest piece of cut content that we know of, even being featured in the Xbox Rogue Ally footage from June. Code for the game implies that this item would have been given to the player for completing the Muckroach Meat Gathering quest, while the tax would be sold by Forged Order for 1 craft medal. This raises a few questions. Was this item an upgrade to the Pimp Pillow or a variation? Where would the last craft medal be located? When was this footage actually recorded? While we have no answers to these questions, we do have access to the actual Dust Pillow tool, as we are able to obtain it in-game via file manipulation. It would explode in a dust cloud upon impact and deal continuous damage over time, and it could be empowered by the Polyp pouch and the duplication thing as well. I really don't know why this tool was cut. It is not that strong in most cases and looks really cool in game. Okay, maybe it is pretty strong with the duplication thing, but still. There was also this Saint card, whatever that means. Now we'll talk about some miscellaneous stuff that does not belong in any category. The Moss Mother team. Not the one we all know, Screw Strive, the original Moss Mother team. It is nowhere to be found in the game nor the game files. It is such a shame too, because this team to me always invoked the feeling of, welcome back, you're playing Hollow Knight again. And I was super excited to hear it in game, especially after hearing Min Firma's awesome recreation. It's a shame that the original version of this OST will forever be lost media. Another quite interesting thing that was cut are these unused heart-ripping animations from the 4 dream bosses in Act 3. Personally, I like the anime execution animation way more. Speaking of these bosses, the Green Prince originally had a wish icon as well. I'm guessing the reason why this one was cut was because they wanted this NPC in specific to be a bit more hidden. Okay, so there's a bit of these strange sprites that I will skim through. The Vault Worm has an unused full body sprite. It's disgusting. There are dead vessel sprites in the Abyss sprite sheet, with one of them looking like the Knight. There is this weird Moss House, Second Sentinel covered in vines, unused cursed HUD assets, lifeblood spikes, weird ass coral thing, and a lower half of Grandmother Silk. Okay, Team Cherry, I see how it is. And recently, these sprites are found, showing 3 figures that look like the Phantom. These figures have the name Organ Sleepers, a naming convention associated with the exhaust organ. One of them looks to be inspired by the coral area, another a plant like Nyleth, and the last made out of bones, probably associated with either the scar or the marrow. To speculate a little bit here, these are most likely failed attempts at creating daughters based off of the legendary Pharloom figures by Grandmother Silk. Not going to lie, I am really bummed out about this being axed. Imagine a trio boss fight against these, them using attacks based on their appearance, but since they are failures, they could not be as powerful as the Act 3 bosses, allowing the fight to feel fair and frantic at the same time. Of course, I am assuming this would have been a fight in the first place, but come on man, it sounds cool. And finally, we are going to talk about the Ari Gibson sketches shared in the ACMI exhibit. These are not necessarily cut content per se, since it is debatable whether or not they even made it into the game, but I do think they're worth discussing. What you may instantly notice right off the bat with these is that there seems to be a lot of sketches featuring stuff from Hollow Knight, like the Knight itself and even the Grim Troop. And I think this is because a lot of these sketches pages were created during the development of Hollow Knight DLCs. We know this because Silksong was originally going to be one, of course. So do not be surprised if you see Hollow Knight references here and there. They don't mean anything. It is very interesting how early on these concepts for Silksong were created though. The first cool things come from these two pages, where we can see what a weaver looks like under their mask. God damn, the first sinner looks magnificent in these. It looks like these were the first concepts of Grey Root, as we can see her on the page while also seeing what looks to be a hut that transforms into the cursed Grey Root is known for. There are also quite a few of these weird bugs which look slightly like Grey Root, so they might be early concepts. The Coral Gorge can also be seen here during the time of what's called the Pink Coral Forest, where the player would actually use the edges of the coral as platforms to jump on. Of course, there's a very unreadable map on the side. God damn it, ACMI. Okay, it is me from the future for one last time, I swear. Speaking of the first sinner, it seems like she was originally not going to be located in the slab, as something else would take her place. The Heretic Heart, to be specific. I have no idea what this disgusting theme would even be about, but what I do know is that it is disgusting. Yeah, also, we can see some early concepts for the slab enemies, which look really unsettling, cool, and lastly, there is this weird guy that looks like he came out of Dark Souls. Anyways, goodbye! On another page, we can see early concepts for the crows. And while most of the text is unreadable, there is this weird ocean outpost that is nowhere near like the Crow Lake. We can also see some more unused crow enemies on these pages, and that is a massive shame. I mean, just look at how goddamn cool these guys look. There are also some unused Citadel enemies on another page. Some of these look pretty royal, if I do say so myself. And some Coral Gorge enemies we do not see in the game files. I think this would have been the Coral Pilgrim, honestly. There's also this weird parasite infection enemy that kinda looks like the Collector, which is pretty unsettling. These last two pages are super weird. On the left, we can see plants that look super similar to those bombastic Saya ones spoken about way earlier. On the right, we can see some strange unused enemies and what looks to be some sort of summit. One of the lines of the text on this page mentions a broken teleporter in a weird cavern room, with some weaver shrines here and there. Literally nothing like this is in the game. I have no idea what Ari was smoking while drawing this. And that is pretty much it for the sketches. There are actually probably a lot more of them in the exhibit we have no idea exist yet, so again, if you can, take pictures of them. There is just one more thing left to talk about. Cut modes. There was originally going to be a Silksong mode according to the Team Cherry Details video in 2019. This mode was going to spin the game into a unique and challenging experience. And while we do not know the extent of that, it was definitely more ambitious than Hollow Knight Steel Soul. The mode unfortunately never made it into the game and was replaced by Steel Soul mode, possibly quite early into development. I kind of don't understand this. I was pretty excited for a game mode that would spin the game into something different, since I don't really like Steel Soul permadeath mode in Hollow Knight. So this to me was a massive shame. Maybe they couldn't figure out how to make this mode work, or just had no ideas for it. There is also a Gods and Glory mode found by manipulating game data, taking up the third slot in this mode selection screen. While this is most likely a leftover from Hollow Knight's code, the way the mode fits this third slot is perfect, making me believe that a third mode for the game may be arriving in the future. Oh no, I'm falling into that DLC trap. And lastly, if you thought that this means anything for the actual Godmaster update for Silksong, no, it does not. I think it's a bit wrong to expect Godhome to be a DLC just like it was in Hollow Knight. This is a completely different game with a different development circumstance. I originally thought that Team Cherry would just give us Godhome with the release of the game, which hasn't happened. There are already mods being made for it, and I think with the ambitious plans the developers have mentioned, I am assuming that they will focus on something else entirely. Just like how we should focus on modding the Coral Gorge. And that's it! Holy, this was a lot to go over. I'm sure that all of the content Team Cherry ended up cutting over the years was in good faith. It is bound for a game that takes so long to release to have so much cut content. And I'm sure that at least some of it will be making its way back in DLC form or even a sequel. The City of Steel being the finale of the Hollow Knight franchise is personally what I want to see the most. Perhaps with Seth as the main character. But then again, I love this world so much it would be really hard to let go. I want to thank the amazing people over at the Hollow Knight Wiki for putting a lot of this information together in a very organized place and finding out about a lot of things mentioned here. On their page you can find some additional things I could not really fit into the video, and it is really the best place to get informed about cut content or any information about the game in general. As stated in the beginning, this video will probably become outdated as the months and years go by, but But hey, I hope you enjoyed and learned some interesting facts about this amazing game. As always, consider subscribing and checking out my Patreon. It includes a Discord server. Thank you for watching and have a damn good night.